Alright, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 10 recap. Oh man, where do we start? Another week in the books, and we finally have some playoff teams. Uh, at least, I would say about 99% sure. We've got at least 3 playoff teams here confirmed so far. Let's see. We had a couple good matchups. One was really close. A couple weren't decided until Monday night. But I think we kind of knew where they were headed to begin with. Let's see. What else? All right, might as well just get right into it with the first matchup. Is the defending champion Springfield Isotopes going up against Mighty Midgets, and the Mighty Midgets took this one down, virtually eliminating the Springfield Isotopes from playoff contention. Well, close, but I wouldn't say quite out yet. But it's, like I said, it's a real long shot for any of the 3-7 teams to maybe squeak in with to get a 6-7 record and possibly squeak into the playoffs at maybe the number 6 spot. But that, like I said, that is looking to be a real long shot. I would say you got a less than 5% chance of making that happen of the 3 teams that are 3-7. So not looking good here for the defending champions. They are definitely on life support. And the Mighty Midgets actually was the highest score of the week, 209.15 to an even 160 for the Isotopes, which is actually, I guess, kind of appropriate for the Isotopes if we're going to have our season end here in Week 10. That, well, basically end, that have it to have it bookended by Week 1 having a 200-point score dropped on us by Brian, as we all remember. What was the total there? 211.3, and now the Mighty Midgets with a 209, so 209.15. So basically had my season bookended by 200-point scores here. And while we're at it, since I also felt like looking up this info beforehand, Mighty Midgets was talking about how his team always manages to defeat the Isotopes here, which is actually almost amusingly true, because I actually went back through the records here and took a quick look to see the matchups of Mighty Midgets versus Springfield Isotopes back when he was still ripping and tearing and big test icicles here. And Mighty Midgets actually came into the league in 2010, and the Isotopes actually started with 2 victories, one in 2010 and one in 2011. But then, ever since 2012, the Isotopes have gone from 2-0 to 2-6 now against the Mighty Midgets. And let's see. In the last 5 matchups of Mighty Midgets versus the Springfield Isotopes, the lowest score that the Midgets have put up is 187.95. So in 5 matchups, well, let's see, in 2012, the Midgets won 158 to 124, so not too bad. But then from 2013, 2014, 15, and 16, in 5 consecutive matchups, the Midgets have scored 215, 195, 187, 193, and now 209.15. So the Isotopes have been absolutely owned by the Mighty Midgets over the last 5 years, unfortunately. So, and it holds true again here this year, obviously, in 2016. As said, the Mighty Midgets quite possibly putting the nail in the coffin here of the defending champion Isotopes. The chances of a dynasty is looking bleak at best. So I guess enough giving you guys boring history and facts here. Let's get into the actual matchup. we had, for midgets, quarterbacks, midgets and isotopes, we had Aaron Rodgers versus Jameis Winston. Rodgers, 63.25 to Winston's 46.6. Kind of knew, I was actually expecting a little bit more from Aaron Rodgers than 63 points here, because they were down probably 24 to 21, 24 to nothing, maybe 20, 28 to nothing, something like that, against the Tennessee Titans. So it was garbage time pretty much from the second quarter on in that matchup. So so 63 was kind of a disappointment there. He only threw for 2 touchdowns, but he did have a rushing touchdown too. So still, that's almost a 20-point difference there in quarterbacks. Then we had receivers. Midgets had Allen Robinson, Dez Bryant, and Corey Coleman. Robinson, 27.5. Bryant, 23.5. And Coleman, only 4.7. But still, that's good for over 55 points from your 3 wide receivers. While, once again, the Isotopes got pretty much... I don't even know how to describe it. The 3 wide receivers for the Isotopes were Jarvis Landry, Randall Cobb, and J.J. Nelson, plugging him in, not being sure about playing Brandon Cooks against the Denver Broncos defense, but that turned out to be a big mistake. Not a matchup deciding mistake, but a mistake either way. Here as Landry, 11 points, Cobb, 7, and Nelson just under 3, since he did lose a fumble. So, excuse me, just barely over 20 points for the Isotopes wide receivers combined, which, I mean, pick one of the Midgets wide receivers. I mean, either Dez Bryant or Allen Robinson. They both outscored all 3 Isotopes wide receivers by themselves. Next, we had running backs, Forte and Hyde versus West and Murray. Looks like Forte, he was just under 100 yards, but no touchdowns, while Hyde had only 14 rushing yards. So you got about 11 points there from your 2 running backs. While for the Isotopes, he had Terrence West, 65 yards. DeMarco Murray, he had 123 rushing yards. He rushed for a touchdown, and he also threw a touchdown, which is 4 points, even though he's not in the flex. I mean, you don't get the completion or the yardage, but you do get the 4 points for the touchdown there. Unfortunately, his passing touchdown was to the Mighty Midgets tight end, which was Delanie Walker, who went off for 9 catches, 124 yards in that touchdown. So the tight ends here was obviously Walker versus Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed only 6 points to 27 for Walker. While, flex plays, we had Spencer Ware versus David Johnson. Johnson, once again, 2 touchdowns, yards, catches, all over the place. He had 27, and Ware, he only managed 10.2. It's actually kind of funny here. The Mighty Midgets had 3 different players score 27 points each. Allen Robinson, Delanie Walker, and David Johnson, each scoring 27 points. And obviously Aaron Rodgers with the 63. That's just that. I mean, that's going to beat you pretty much every week. Kickers, Sturgis versus Crosby. Pretty even there. Yahoo says 5-7. So it was probably pretty close to that. Then defenses, we had Kansas City versus Carolina. Actually a head-to-head matchup, which wasn't looking good, I think, for Kansas City. They were down 17-0, and I think I stopped paying attention because I knew that I was pretty much done for anyway with, Aaron Rodgers and Delanie Walker and Allen Robinson. It was like, oh, great. Might as well not even pay attention because my defense is down 17 points. They're going to lose. But then they ended up actually coming back and got a defensive touchdown, a couple turnovers, and ended up winning the game 20-17. So I believe they actually got about 32 points, something like that. And yeah, for Kansas City's defense. And Carolina, Yahoo says 12. I think it was right around there. Maybe it was 15, maybe a little bit more, but it was right around that. So, but still, not nearly enough for the Isotopes when said Mighty Midgets wide receivers went off and it pretty much crushed uh, in that category. Again, like what did I say? 50, like it was like 55 to 20. So a 20-point difference for the quarterbacks, a 30-point difference from the wide receivers, a 15-point difference at flex, a 20-point difference at tight end. Yeah, you know where you can tell where this is going. So, with the win, Mighty Midgets he moves to 7-3. He's now up in seventh place. I'm sorry, not seventh, second place. He's got 7 wins, and he is in second place. While the Springfield Isotopes, they are the other way around. They are 3-7, and they drop down to 10th place. Just one last comment. It's weird. I don't know. It's very strange that that this has been. I mean, it has been a strange season. But when was the last time that you can remember that the Isotopes wide receivers were their Achilles heel? I mean, Landry, Cobb, Cooks, like it's all been injuries or underperformances here. Landry's been really disappointing. Just and yeah, when was the last time that the Isotopes, their strongest point was their running backs, and the weakest point was the wide receivers? It's been a long time since that's ever happened. So and it wasn't by design. So anyway, enough of me whining about my team. I'm sure you guys, I know you love listening to it, and you're all smiling as I say the Isotopes have a less than 5% chance of making the playoffs here. So that makes everybody. I guess that balances it out here to make you guys happy instead of just enduring the pain of having to listen to me go on and on and on about my own team when you know that this is going to be pretty much the last time I get to talk about them in any meaningful way here for the rest of the season here. So, all right, that's the end of this matchup. Let's see what we've got next. All right, the next matchup, we had a Monday Night Miracle from the FC Bohoric going up against New Gods Mad Titans. FC Bohoric was a heavy underdog going into this one. Yahoo's projections had him losing by about 25 points here. And even according to Yahoo, without the score adjustments, it looks like New Gods Mad Titans should have won this one by 40 points. That's 40, not 4. But that is not what happened. And let's get right into the matchup here. Again, this came down to Monday night as the New Gods Mad Titans were finished. And FC Bohoric, he still had, Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Jennings, and Paul Perkins playing both Giants running backs and their wide receiver. Interesting play there. But the biggest difference was obviously the Baltimore Ravens defense all the way back on Thursday night. They absolutely crushed the Cleveland Browns. Yahoo says 19, but the actual total was 43. So that's probably the biggest difference maker here that bumped up FC Bohoric's score. Let's see. I guess the final score was, I guess I should mention it, huh? 187.15 to 184.2. So just about a 3-point victory here for FC Bohoric. Let's see. Quarterbacks, we had Matt Ryan versus Phillip Rivers. Rivers actually won this one. 42.3 to 32.35. But actually, Matt Ryan, he did have a long touchdown pass in that game, so he got a 3-point bonus there. So that covers the 3 points margin there. But if you were paying attention, you would know also that Phillip Rivers for New Gods Mad Titans, he was doing, I think he was having a great game up until the fourth quarter. in which he ended up with 4 interceptions, all in the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly. So that was a 12-point cut from the New Gods Mad Titans score there. I mean, anytime there's a 3-point difference here, and I've said it before probably many times, that is the slightest little thing that goes one way or the other is what shifts the matchup in one way or another here. So I said Matt Ryan, he had that 3-point bonus for his long touchdown. Or if Rivers doesn't throw 4 interceptions, if he only throws 3, that that would be enough to get you the win there, but what didn't happen. Let's see, wide receivers. Great matchup here once again. And was it last week? Somebody I can't remember the matchup last week that had a great wide receiver battle. But this one we had for FC, he had Tyrell Williams. So Rivers to Tyrell Williams there. Odell Beckham Jr. and Mike Wallace. Williams had 23.5, Beckham 25.5, and Wallace was just a hair under 10. So you got about, 52, 63 points, about 63 from your 3 receivers. While New Gods Mad Titans, he had Doug Baldwin, Larry Fitzgerald, and Alshon Jeffrey. Baldwin 6 for 60, but he did have 3 of those catches were touchdowns. So he was just under 29. Fitzgerald 12 for 133, so about a little over 25. And Jeffrey, he had 8.7. So all your guys pretty much balanced out there with the mid-20s, and then 8 and 9 here. So, but looks like New Gods Mad Titans, you got was about 54, 62, 63 from your 3 receivers. So great matchup there again. Pretty even. Let's see. Then running backs. Like I said, FC Bohorik, he played both Giants running backs, Rashad Jennings and Perkins. Jennings 87 yards, Perkins 31. So that's 11.8. While New Gods Mad Titans, same old story here, as it seems like every week. We talk about his 2 running backs, Melvin Gordon and Le'Veon Bell. Once again, we are slashing points from these guys. Looks like Gordon, he lost about 11 points for you. He got you about 7. So Yahoo says 18, but he only got you 7. And again, Le'Veon Bell got a cut 16.7 off of his 34.4 point total. So that's almost exactly half of his point total got cut there. That's going to hurt you every time, even though, like I said, FC Bohorik, he only got 11, but you got about 20, a little over 20 from your running backs. So let's see. Then tight ends, man, just good matchups all over the place here. Antonio Gates for New Gods versus Cameron Brate for FC. Brate had 7 for 84 and a touchdown. Gates 4 for 60 and a touchdown. So Brate takes this one by about 5, 21.4 to 16.3. Flex players, again, New Gods Mad Titans cannot find a way to get one of those running backs, Le'Veon Bell, into his flex play. He went with, again, Terrell Pryor Sr., who got 9.8, and FC Bohorik, he went again with Ty Montgomery, but he was only able to manage 4 points. Looks like he might be severely affected by the return of James Starks there to the Packers offense. He might not be doing as much rushing as he had been before, and he was catching a lot of short, quick passes out of the backfield there. Looks like those days might be numbered here for Ty Montgomery and FC Bohorik. Kickers, we had Gano versus McManus. Gano, 1 field goal, two PATs. McManus, couple field goals, couple PATs. Looks like he had a 50-yarder, he had a 30-yarder. So there's about a 5-6 point difference there between kickers in favor of FC Bohorik. And New Gods Mad Titans, for defense, he went with the Washington Redskins over his Philadelphia Eagles, which looks like it was the right decision because both teams did win and did okay. But I mean, the better play going into it was probably the one that you made, the Washington Redskins, even though said Philadelphia was playing Atlanta. That's a tough matchup because they're really playing well this year. So let's see. Yahoo says 12 for the Redskins defense. It was probably a little bit more than that. I think it was a little closer to 20. But again, Baltimore defense, a 43-point performance here was enough to push this one just enough, just enough to push it in favor of FC Bohoric there. Like I said, a 3-point difference and able to just squeak it out. I think, like, the end, I didn't actually get to watch the Monday night game, but I think Justin said that Rashad Jennings had a 25-yard carry. Like his last two carries of the game was like a 5-yarder and a 25-yarder, which ended up being just enough to pull him ahead. So it must have been pretty close to a tie there, but he got the points there to move him ahead. And all right, New Gods Mad Titans. He now drops to 6-4, still in 5th place in playoff contention. Can't be too worried yet there for you. While FC Bohoric, he now moves up. He was in the basement. He's moved all the way up to 7th place. Excuse me, knocking on the playoff door at 7th place. He is 4-6. Said 7th place, knocking on the door there. So, interesting last couple weeks for him. Next matchup, we have a pitiful matchup here. The Dub C Hooligans going up against Everybody Ertz. And this was the battle of futility as the Dub C Hooligans pulls out a victory here with only 141 points versus Everybody Ertz with only 126 points. But I think that's been the story of Dub C Hooligans 2016 season here. Getting victories with mediocre point totals. We'll have to wait and see how long that lasts, especially if you do make your way here into the playoffs. Those mediocre scores are not going to get you very far. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's just get into this matchup. Quarterbacks, Breeze versus Wentz. Oh, he actually went with Wentz? I thought he went with Marcus Mariota, which... that might have actually... Wow, let's see, that's 15-point difference. Wow. I thought... I would have sworn it in the podcast they said that Everybody Ertz had Marcus Mariota in as his starting quarterback. But no, he went with Carson Wentz. And the difference between Wentz and Mariota is exactly 15 points. And if you tack on exactly 15 points to Everybody Ertz's score, he would have won this matchup by 0.1. Brutal. I didn't even realize that till just now. Oh, ouch. Oh, man. That is brutal. Everybody Ertz. But that's pretty much the story of his season in a nutshell. Drew Brees, 46 points for Dub C Hooligans to Wentz's 35.55. Like I said, exactly 15 points less than Mariota would have gotten you. Costing you a victory here by the narrowest of margins. But let's see, wide receivers. Dub C had Emmanuel Sanders, Jordan Matthews, and Steve Smith. 10, 13, and 17 respectively. So that is, 40 points? A little over 40. Ertz's wide receivers, Brandon Marshall, John Brown, and Pierre Garcon. Marshall's been really quiet. I think he started off pretty well this season, but he really trailed off here after the first couple weeks. He's been pretty disappointing. John Brown, speaking of disappointing, he's been battling injuries, not too much there from him. And Garcon, he's been pretty hit or miss, but kind of consistent in the past few weeks here, but still nothing outstanding. Marshall 5.5, Brown 5, and Garcon 14. So that's about 25, a little over 25 from your three receivers. Running backs, Dub C had Devontae Booker and Tim Hightower. Booker, 76 yards. Hightower, 21 yards. So that is 9.7 from your two running backs combined. No touchdowns or anything there. Ertz, well, we had a battle of the New Orleans running backs here, Ingram and Hightower. Let's see what Hightower got, 21, and looks like Ingram got 50. So slight favor there to Ingram, but still not much to write home about with only 5 points, no touchdowns there. Ivory, the other running back for Ertz was Chris Ivory, who had 31 rushing yards, so 3 points there. You got 8.1 from your two running backs. Tight ends, Jimmy Graham for Ertz versus Gary Barnidge for Dub C. Let's see, Graham 4 for 48 and Barnidge 1 for 8. So 8.8 to 1.8 there. Flex plays, we had Lamar Miller versus Devontae Freeman. Miller had 83 yards, no catches or anything, so 8.3. While Freeman, looks like he had 49 rushing yards, a couple catches, 30 rushing yards. He got you just over 11. Kickers, Hauschka versus Bryant, pretty even, couple field goals, couple PATs for each of them. And then good defenses here. Houston versus Arizona. Houston, they did pretty good against Jacksonville, couple turnovers, looks like they had a score. Yahoo says 17, a little bit more than that probably. And Arizona, looks like they had a couple sacks, a turnover, gave up 20 points, did okay. I think they gave up a lot of yards, though, to the San Francisco 49ers, but they did get the win. And that was enough for Dub C, to get the win here. Said despite those low point totals, it was just enough here. Taking a quick look at everybody Ertz's lineup to see what the difference was here. Said he has three quarterbacks on his roster: Wentz, Mariota, and Carson Palmer. And he went with the lowest scoring one, which I mean, that's, looking at it in hindsight, it's easy to say that was the worst decision. But a matchup against Atlanta, you got to like that, being a potential shootout on paper at least, but just didn't quite pan out that way. Like I said, well, if you had started Carson Palmer, he still got 49 points, but that would have been not quite enough to make up the difference here. But yeah, Marcus Mariota would have gotten you the victory by 1 point. Definitely didn't help that you didn't have Michael Crabtree, who has been a pretty solid performer here all season long, and Tevin Coleman. He was a monster before his hamstring injury, so you've been kind of forced to plug and play some other running backs here. But again, not enough for everybody Ertz. He drops to 3-7, and he is now in 12th place. While we've got the Dub C Hooligans, he is now 6-4, and he is still in the playoffs. He is in 6th place. And the next matchup, we had Huber Squashers versus Cobra Brianna. I don't think the Cobra Brianna liked being referred to as the Twerk and Bowl Cuts, from what I understand. So we're going to refer to you as Kibbles and Vicks. I'm pretty sure that was you. So we're going to take it old school with Kibbles and Vicks, Huber Squashers, Kibbles and Vicks. And this one came down to Monday night, as Huber Squashers had about an 8-point lead. He had Gio Bernard and Tyler Eifert, while Kibbles and Vicks had, just the Bengals defense left to go. But the Bengals defense could not pull it out. They only got you 10 points, while Bernard and Eifert were able to get you about 14 and a half points. So it wasn't enough to cover there. You would have liked to see more from the from the Bengals defense, but it didn't happen. as Huber Squashers defeats Kibbles and Vicks 159.7 to 147.2, so a 12-point difference there. Quarterbacks, pretty even here. We had Cousins versus Brady, 43 to 39.5 in favor of Cousins. Wide receivers, another pretty good matchup. Huber Squashers had Jordy Nelson, Willie Snead, and Kendall Wright. Nelson, 12 for 126 and a touchdown, 30.5 points. Snead, 5 for 50 and 2 touchdowns. And Kendall Wright, he only caught 2 passes for 8 yards, but one of them was a touchdown, so 8.8 there. So looks like 30.6, 21.7, and 8.8. So about 60 points there from your 3 wide receivers. Kibbles and Vicks. He had Stefon Diggs, Adam Humphries, and Julian Edelman. Diggs, 13 for 164. So you got a bonus there for going over 150. He had 32.5. Humphries looks like 9.5. And Edelman looks like he lost a fumble, but he did okay. He got you just under 15 points. So that's about, 25 and 32, 58. So yeah, pretty even scores there. Pretty close in terms of wide receiver production there. Then we had the running backs. Huber Squashers, Jonathan Stewart and Gio Bernard. Stewart, 39 yards. Bernard, 17 yards. So that is, 5.8? Something like that, 5.6. Let's see. Kibbles and Vicks, he had Jay Ajayi and Jerick McKinnon. Looks like Ajayi had 79 yards and McKinnon had only 16. So you got about 9.5 points there from your 2 running backs combined. So yeah, this matchup is fairly even here, up and down so far. So what was the difference that swung this one in favor of Huber Squashers here? Let's take a look. Tight ends, we had Olsen versus Witten. Witten won this one actually 11.9 to 8.9. Flex plays, Huber Squashers had Eifert, who got 12.6, while Zach Miller, he had 7.2. So again, both teams, I think this happened last week, where two teams had, was it Huber Squashers and Mighty Midgets, I want to say? I can't remember for sure, but they both had tight ends also. They both played 2 tight ends, one in each of their flex spots, but happens again this week, and let's see. Looks like it went a little bit in favor of Huber Squashers there, about 21 to 19, 22 to 19, something like that. Kickers, Tucker versus Catanzaro. Tucker, couple field goals, couple PATs. Yahoo says 8. Catanzaro, 2 field goals, 2 PATs. Looks like he had a short field goal too. Let's see. Yahoo says 10, probably a little right around there. Let's see. And then defenses, again, Cincinnati versus Seattle. Like I said, Cincinnati ended up getting an even 10 points, which is what Yahoo says. And Seattle ended up getting the win over New England. Had a couple turnovers. Actually did pretty well. Yahoo says 11. I think it was closer to 20, something like that. So that was probably the biggest difference maker here, is the Seattle defense doing a little bit better than Cincy. Let's see. Eifert a little bit better than Miller, and Cousins doing a little bit better than Tom Brady. So it was just said it was enough for the Huber Squashers to get that 12-point victory. He moves to 7-3. He is now in 3rd place, while Kibbles and Vicks, he drops to 4-6. He is now in 8th place. So the Huber Squashers pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot, but Kibbles and Vicks, despite the loss, still on track to possibly squeak out a playoff spot here. So no reason to stop fighting if you are Kibbles and Vicks there, even though you are 4-6. All right, next matchup, we had Possum Magic going up against the Detonators. This was a must-win for the Detonators, and, well, probably you could say a must-win also for Possum Magic, as I think he was riding a 3 or 4 game losing streak going into this matchup. And he was able to snap it with a 173.5 to 151.1 victory here. Quarterbacks, Possum Magic had Ben Roethlisberger go for 75 points to the Detonators, who had no Matthew Stafford this week, and he rolled with Jay Cutler, who got him just under 22 points. So, a 50-point difference in the quarterbacks here. I think we can tell what the biggest matchup influence here, the deciding factor was in this matchup, I guess I should say. Because it looks like everything else pretty much swings in favor of the Detonators here. Wide receivers, Possum Magic had Kenny Britt, AJ Green, and Cole Beasley. Britt, he got just under 18. Green, just under 20. And Beasley, a little over 8. So that looks like about 36, and 8 is 44. So about 45 points from your 3 receivers. And Detonators, let's see. Mike Evans, 10.5. Shepard, 15.2. Eli Rogers, Eli Strong, Eli Rogers, I don't know who it is anymore, but he had 14.2 points. So that looks like about 40 points from your 3 receivers there. So yeah, actually this matchup was heavily in favor of Possum Magic so far. Yeah, you did get a slight advantage in the wide receivers there, but then we had running backs. Possum had, is his name Robert Kelly, R. Kelly, trapped in the closet against Minnesota, and Jeremy Hill. Looks like Kelly had 97 yards. Hill had only 46 yards, but he did punch in a touchdown. So you got about 20 points from your 2 running backs. While, let's see, Detonators, he had Jordan Howard, who had an even 100 yards, but he did lose a fumble, which takes away 2 of your 3 points, your 3-point bonus there. So he got you exactly 11. And Ryan Matthews, who he actually went over 100 yards and had 2 touchdowns. So looks like he got you about 25 points there. So that's about 36. Pretty good score there from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, we had CJ Fedorowicz versus Gronk. And Gronk wins this matchup, but not by a whole lot, as the scores were 8.6 to 5.6 in favor of Gronk, who also, I should mention, is now injured with a believed to be a punctured lung, if I remember correctly. So, frankly, I would be quite surprised if he plays this week or next week. I don't know. Excuse me, the severity of that injury or the recovery time, but doesn't punctured lung just sound really painful? Yeah, I'm not sure that's something I would never want to hear from a doctor, a punctured lung. But anyway, on to the flex plays. We had Sproles versus Kelvin Benjamin. Pretty even matchup here. Actually would have been almost dead even, except for Kelvin Benjamin losing a fumble. Sproles 15.6 and Benjamin 13.4. So yeah, again, pretty close there. It would have been said if you had those 2 extra points, if Benjamin had not fumbled, it would have been pretty much even. Kickers, Lambo versus Franks. Each one had a couple PATs and a field goal, slightly in favor of Lambo. Then we had defenses, Minnesota for Possum versus the Rams for Detonators. This one actually didn't go too good for the Minnesota Vikings. They lost to the Redskins. Actually, I think Yahoo says 7, but I think it was actually 4. I think you did lose. You actually lost some points there because they gave up a ton of yards all over the place here. They only had 1 turnover and 1 sack and gave up too many points, a lot of yards. I think the actual total was 4, so you lost a couple points there. As for the Detonators, he had the Rams. They won against the Jets. only gave up 6 points, so you got a lot there. But unfortunately, they only had 1 sack and 1 turnover. You would have liked to see in such a low-scoring game, maybe a little bit more on turnovers, or sacks at least. Yahoo said 13. I can't remember what the exact total was, but I think it had to have been closer into the 20s, I would guess. But it wasn't enough here. Like I said, Boston Magic started out strong, putting Detonators behind the 8 ball with instead of 50-point difference, over 50-point difference between quarterbacks here. So really wasn't much you could do here if you're the Detonators. Even though the difference ended up being 22 points. So you definitely made up ground the rest of the way down your roster here, but yeah, that is a huge difference there. If you could have, 22 points. So if you would have been able to get a 40-some point performance from Jay Cutler, that could have turned this one. But unfortunately, so you got stuck in a bad spot here with no Matthew Stafford. So, but that's the way it goes here. And the Detonators, let's see. Detonators dropped to 3-7, now in 11th place. While Boston Magic, he is now up to 6-4, and he is in 4th place. And finally, we had the first place team from Gags to Riches going up against Disco. And Gags to Riches stays in first place, knocks off Disco. The final score here, 171.2 to 149.3. Let's see, some tough matchups here. I think some bye week blues here in terms of quarterbacks. Let's see. Actually, no, not really. Cam Newton, let's see, he actually did a lot better than Andy Dalton would have done for you, but Disco, he did not have Andrew Luck, although he did have, let's see, Sam Bradford on the bench. I think at one point this year, Disco had like 3 or 4 quarterbacks on his roster. But he had Sam Bradford, but he decided to pick up and play Alex Smith, which ended up being a bad decision because it looks like Sam Bradford had over 50 points. And you lost by 22. So I think, well, looks like you still would have lost because Smith had 34 and Bradford had 54. So a 20-point difference there. You tack on 20 to your score. Still gives you only 169. You still would have lost the matchup here. But that's tough. What are you going to do? Let's see. Let's get into the actual matchup here. Should we? Yeah, I guess we should, huh? Gags to Riches, Andy Dalton versus said Alex Smith for Disco. Andy Dalton only 28.7, while Alex Smith only 34.2. So pretty low scores there from both quarterbacks. Then we had wide receivers. This one was absolutely dominated from Gags to Riches, as he had Demaryius Thomas, Julio Jones, and Antonio Brown. Thomas 22.7, Jones 23.5, and Antonio Brown 37.4. So quickly, that is 45 and 37. So 82, 83 points. Oh man, from your 3 wide receivers combined, pretty good. Unfortunately for Disco, all single-digit scores from his wide receivers: Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, and Dontrell Inman. 4, 9.8, and 9.3 consecutively there. Thomas, Hopkins, and Inman. So about 22 points from your 3 receivers is not going to cut it against an 80-point performance from Gags to Riches wide receivers. Running backs, we had Gags to Riches with Todd Gurley and is it Peyton Barber? I'm not even really sure. Is it Tiki Barber's long lost brother? That was Rondé Barber. Another Barber but he only had 38 yards. Gurley, he only had 64 yards. Has there been a bigger bust in the NFL this year, I think, than Todd Gurley, who was hyped to be like a top 5 draft pick going into the season, but he has been just pedestrian, I think, the entire season, which, I mean, you can't really say it's entirely his fault because their offense is kind of a mess here, but it looks like, just taking a quick look at Todd Gurley, his highest rushing total this year is 85, and he's been mostly held under 50 to like 60 or less every game this year. He only has 3 touchdowns, so pretty disappointing year from him. So we'll have to wait and see how that affects Gags to Riches going forward in his attempt to take a second title here. In what, there'll be 2 titles in 4 years here. So said Gurley 64, Barber 38. So that is what, 10.2. Then we had Disco, Ezekiel Elliott, and T.J. Yeldon. As pretty much everybody probably knows from watching the Steelers game, Ezekiel Elliott had 3 total touchdowns. One was a receiving it was a receiving touchdown, but it was an 85 yarder. You did get the +3 for the long touchdown bonus, but you didn't get all those yards from the catch. However, he did have 114 rushing yards, so you got, 18 and 15, probably close to 35 points from Ezekiel Elliott there, while T.J. Yeldon, he only managed 32 rushing yards. Excuse me, so 3.2 points there. So that ended up being, close to 40 from your two running backs, I should say. Then tight ends, actually heavily in favor of Disco here. Kelsey versus Rudolph. Kelsey 8.1, Rudolph 17.9. Flex plays, Gags to Riches had Rashard Matthews from Tennessee. He got you 15.3, while Disco went with Tavon Austin, who managed 4.9. Not too much there. Let's see. Kickers, we had Santos versus Bailey. A lot of field goals all over the place here. Yahoo says 13 for Santos, 14 for Bailey. So you tack on the fractions, it was probably closer to like 14 to 15. A little bit more from each one there. And then we had defenses. New England versus the Jets. New England, they had a couple sacks. They blocked a kick, but they lost the game, gave up a lot of yards. Yahoo says 6. It might have been 9 or 12, somewhere maybe a little bit more than that, but right around that 6 points there. And then as for Disco, he did... I was kind of surprised because I was watching the games and I saw that the Broncos won that game on a extra point blocked, and they ran it back for the 2 points. So I was making a note to myself, you got to make sure that you tack on those 2 points for Disco to the Denver Broncos defense, because I don't think Yahoo actually credits that here, at least not yet in your lineup there. But it didn't matter because you actually used the Jets defense, who only gave up 9 points, but they lost the game, gave up 3 sacks. So they played the Rams. They didn't... Yahoo says 9. I think it was a lot more than that because they didn't give up. So they only gave up 9 points. I think they did pretty good in terms of yardage given up, but said you would have liked to see it. Same thing with, I think I mentioned before, with the Rams defense in this matchup. I said a 9-6 game, you'd like to see maybe a couple turnovers or a few more sacks there for your team, but wasn't enough here. As said, even though you got that big game from Ezekiel Elliott, which countered pretty much everything else for Gags to Riches here, the difference was obviously the wide receivers, Thomas Jones and Antonio Brown, anytime you're going to get 80, 85 points from those three guys total, that's going to make Gags to Riches pretty tough to defeat, even though he managed only a 28-point score from his quarterback. So you could easily envision Gags to Riches having had a 200-point, a two Hondo point game. I don't know, was it two Hondos up against Disco this week if he had gotten a little bit better production from the quarterback position, or if he had at least gone with stuck with Cam Newton here. So, but he didn't. But doesn't matter because he still got the victory here, and he stays in first place. He's got 7 wins now, magic number 7. He's in first place, 7-3. While Disco, he drops to 4-6, and he is in 9th place. So that's pretty much where we are at for here in the season coming up here after 10 weeks. And I believe it was, taking a quick look here, at the knockout pool, it was Kevin Bean, the Dub C Hooligans, were eliminated this week. So that leaves just the Springfield Isotopes and Possum Magic here fighting for the knockout pool money here in week 11. Trying to think if there's anything else that I didn't mention in my beginning of the review wrap up here, or beginning, not blah. Am I even sure what I'm saying anymore? Is anybody even listening anymore? Probably not. But said I did some ranting here at the beginning of the review. Let's see if there's anything else I want to go off on here. I guess just taking a look at the standings here. You know what? I'm gonna have to. Hopefully Brian hears this and can talk. Maybe he'll talk about it a little bit in the podcast here, because if you take a look at the standings, and the Isotopes and the Detonators here are sitting at 10th place and 11th place respectively, and with the 2 highest point totals against here. But here's what really bothers me. If you look at, Gags to Riches, he's in first place, and he actually has the highest point total of anybody here so far. But he also has the least amount of points against by a significant margin, by more than 100. Actually close to, well, no, Dub C, he's pretty low there too. He's just over 1,500. But in terms of points against, Gags to Riches versus, compared to like us, Brian, the Isotopes and the Detonators here, it's a 350 point difference between points against. So if you figure that 10 weeks, 350 points, that's 35 points a week. So Brian, if you cut 35 points off of your opponent's score every week, you would be 7-3. If you cut 35 points off of my opponent's scores every week, I'd be 8-2. So it's just brutal the way things have gone this year. I think I blame Detling with his 11 shuffle of the schedule, picking that number. It's absolutely haunted us and cursed us throughout the entire season here. I could bitch a little bit about, you know what? I'm just gonna do it, because a couple weeks ago when I picked up Marquise Lee, because I had some injury problems with my wide receivers, and I picked him up and played him. You know what, Marquise Lee? If you take a look at him, over a 4-week span, Marquise Lee, here were his point totals: 12, 17, 1, and 13. Can you guess what week I picked up and played Marquise Lee? Yeah, it was that week where he scored 1 point, and I lost by, 9? Not to mention that was the week that Spencer Ware got hurt and didn't get me anything. And then, this doesn't even matter, but because I would have lost anyway. But I think last week I plugged and played Tyreek Hill because Jerry Maclin was hurt. I still had some questions in terms of wide receivers with Randall Cobb and stuff. With Tyreek Hill, again, here, over a 4-week span, Tyreek Hill had 13, 21, 4, and 19. 13, 21, 4, and 19. Can you guess which week I plugged and played Tyreek Hill? The 4-point game. Like, come on. Are you kidding me? Like, Marquise Lee. You know what, Marquise Lee? Fuck you, Marquise Lee, for having 1 point the week I used you. And you know what, Tyreek Hill? Fuck you for scoring 4 points the week that I used you and going for 21 and 19 the bookends, the weeks that bookended that 1 week that I actually used you. So god damn it, you guys. You're killing me. You're ruining my season. But I could run on with excuses for for another hour probably, but here, yeah. I think the hardest part here is looking at the looking at the standings and seeing that, although of course I do love the symmetry here, we've got 3, 3, 3, and 3 in terms of 3, 7, and 3s, 3, 6s, and 4s, 3, 4, and 6s, 3, 3, and 7s. So always loving the symmetry. And however, if you look at the points for, we've got the top 4 teams are all at 1,700 or over. And then we're ticking down to 1,600, then down into the 1,500s. And then boom, 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 we go down a little ways in here. All of a sudden we've got the Springfield Isotopes with 1,723, jumping up over 200 points from let's see, who's the team in 9th place here? Disco. So Disco actually has a better record and has scored 200 points less than the Isotopes, but is actually ahead here. It's been an absolutely brutal season. Oh, you know what? Getting back to Gags to Riches, I was going to get into this before with his mentioning how he has not faced really any stiff competition this year. Let's see, take a look at his schedule. Gags to Riches. Let's see. Over the past, the highest point total that Gags to Riches has faced this year is 174.75. So about 175. That's the highest point total anyone has put up against him. He's gone against, in the last, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the last 8 weeks, 7 weeks, I'm sorry. He's gone against, oh, God, it's so maddening. The last 7 weeks, Gags has gone up against the point totals of 144, 120, 110, 154, 129, 131, and 149. So 155 is the highest point. Only one. Let's see. In week 1, he lost to 162, and then he lost to 157. But then he did win against the 174. But yeah, only twice this year has Gag's opponent gone over 160 points. Twice. That's it. I mean, he's not getting any okay, I give you credit. You've been doing well. You said you are the highest point total. You have the highest point total of any team in the league this year. You've gone over 200 twice, but just you've got no competition. Like I said, 120, 110, 130, 130, 150, 140. Oh God, it's just it's endlessly frustrating, especially to, again, I don't want to do it, but again, to talk about the Isotopes here, when the lowest score that we've had all season is 151. Like, we've been in the 160 to 170 pretty much all season long. Over 170, said 160s. So in most of those matchups, like I said, would be getting wins here. I wonder what would have been if the Isotopes had the same schedule as Gags to Riches here. But again, I could go on and on about this and just how brutally frustrating this season has been for me, which is, I'm sure, music to your ears, hearing just about how painful it's been having to endure this shit season here. But at least I'm not everybody Ertz, who has lost 6 games in a row and might end up with the Phillip Rivers jersey for the second year out of the last 3, keeping it in the Huber family, I guess. So I mean, if he didn't bring it to the draft because he couldn't find it, but it might end up turning out that he can just hold on to it because he's going to need it. Or maybe is the curse actually still on Jay because he didn't bring the cursed jersey to the draft to give to Jimmy. So I mean, technically it's still in his possession. So that must mean the curse is still on him. And here we are, 10 weeks into the season, and everybody Ertz looks like he is well on his way to ending up in 12th place once again. So, excuse me, is that curse real? I don't know, maybe. But then again, Brian still has that trophy, and we can never let that go. He still got it, and so Brian has the trophy in his garage, and Jay has the jersey somewhere in storage or in his house. Who knows where it is now? But and who are the bottom 2 teams in the league right now? The Detonators and everybody Ertz. So is the curse real? That is up to you. All right, let's see. That's everything for Week 10. Let's take a quick look here at the matchups for Week 11, because, like I mentioned a little bit before, the way it's shaping out, I think there's still a chance for a 6 and 7 team to make the playoffs. One said the 3 and 7 teams, Isotopes, Detonators, and everybody Ertz. Obviously, you've got to win out your schedule and get a lot of help to have any chance. Let's take a look here. Then we've got, so it would require, let's see, Possum, New Gods Mad Titans, and Dubsy Hooligans. They are all 6 and 4. So for those bottom 3 teams to have any chance, at least 1 or 2 of those teams need to lose the rest of their games. So, and let's just take a quick look at the upcoming schedule here. Actually, here this week we have New Gods versus Possum. So one of those 2 teams is going to get a win. One of those 2 teams is going to get to 7. So that means we're looking at Dub C as possibly. Said if you're one of these bottom teams, you're probably hoping that Dub C is going to lose the rest of his matchups. Let's take a quick look at his schedule. Dub C, which it's definitely possible because it looks like Dub C is facing all 3 of the top 3 teams right now. Mighty Midgets, Huber Squashers, and Gags to Riches here in the last 3 weeks. So tough matchups there. Could Dub C Hooligans end up 6 and 7? That's a possibility. We'll have to wait and see what happens here. Let's see. Sorry. For a second there, I thought I screwed up the recording here and had to go back here, but I think we're okay. Where was I? Okay, so Possum and New Gods Med Titans, one of those guys is going to get to 7 wins. Whichever one doesn't is going to, I said, you're going to hope that they lose at least once or one. You're hoping that one of them said not only loses this week, but loses the next 2 weeks as well. Taking a look at the schedule here. After Possum, New Gods has Disco and the Isotopes. While if Possum loses this week, his last 2 matchups are versus Kibbles and Vix and everybody Ertz. So that's going to be, no offense to Kibbles and Vix and everybody Ertz, but especially everybody Ertz, I think if you're banking on Possum Magic losing all 3 of his matchups here coming up. That's probably not going to happen. Not saying that everybody Ertz is going to roll over and die on Possum here, but said I wouldn't. Says not looking good. You're kind of hoping for, again, if you're one of those 3-7 teams, it looks like you're going to be hoping for the Dubsy Hooligans to drop 3 in a row here. And of course, you got to win 3 in a row, which you've only won 3 games in 10 tries here. Plus, we've still got these 4 and 6 teams who are all trying to get to 7. They need to win out to get to 7. Don't know if that is possible, but you want to get to at least. So those 4 and 6 teams to end up 6 and 7, they need to go 2 and 1 here the rest of the way. And for that to happen, let's take a quick look. Those 4 and 6 teams are FC Bohoric, Kibbles and Vix, and Disco. And here this week we actually have FC versus Kibbles. So one of you is going to get a win, one of you is going to lose. Disco, he's going against the Detonators, and obviously the Detonators have to win and to have any chance here and avoid getting that 8th loss. Well, obviously you also need Disco to get a loss here to try and move up in the standings. So that's going to be interesting. Let's take a quick look here, looking ahead at the schedule for FC, Kibbles, and Disco. Let's see. Looks like FC is going to have. He's got Ertz and the Huber Squashers, so he could possibly. Looks like he could go 2 and 1. He could go 1 and 2. Who knows what could happen there? It's going to be tricky for him to try and get to 7 wins. Kibbles looks like after this week he's got Possum and Disco. So yeah, depends what happens this week. Then Possum, that will be a tough matchup for Kibbles, and then he's facing Disco. So like I said, you need to either win out to get to 7 wins or go 2 and 1 to get to 6 and 7. So that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for all 3 of those teams. Disco, he's got, again, the Detonators this week. He's got New Gods Mad Titans next week, and then Kibbles in week 13. So it's really convoluted situation here. In terms of the standings, is it still possible for a 6 and 7 team to get in? Yeah. But it's going to be really tough. Like I said, you're kind of hoping that Dubsy Hooligans lose the rest of their games, and either New Gods or Possum loses the rest of their games, which actually isn't looking too good for that to happen. For them to lose 3 games in a row, that's asking a lot. Although, I mean, for the three teams that are 4 and 6, for them to go 2 and 1 here to get to 6 and 7. I mean, looks like that's well within the realm of possibilities here. Maybe one of them gets a 3-game winning streak and gets to 7. But yeah, if you're one of these 6, if you're one of these 3 and 7 teams, you still got life, so you're not dead yet. But again, you've got to win out and get very lucky here coming up. So, and that's going to be interesting too here, I think, next week, as we've seen with some trades and stuff action that's been going on here. Next week in week 12, 2 of those 3 and 7 teams that both have to win out will be playing each other, the Isotopes versus the Detonators. So someone's going to knock the other one out, assuming they both manage to get a win here in week 10 or week 11. One of them's going to knock the other one out next week in week 12 here. So it's not over. A lot of interesting things are going to happen here. Especially, I think the picture will be a lot clearer after this week. Again, whoever can get, let's see if Dubsy can get to 7. If I said either New Gods or Possum Magic is going to get to 7, so that would be at least 4 of the playoff. Well, definitely 4 of the definitely 4 of the 6 playoff spots are going to be filled after this week. Teams that have 7 wins, I don't think said once if you got 7, you're pretty much guaranteed the way the standings are shaping up here. So said we'll definitely have at least 4 of those guys after this week, leaving only 2 playoff spots being chased after by the rest of the league, which is 8 guys here fighting for 2 spots. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like I said, this week could shake things up here. Gags could finish off the Isotopes. Disco could finish off the Detonators. Let's see. FC and Kibbles, one of those guys is going to move up and maybe hope to squeeze out a playoff spot here. Huber Squashers versus Everybody Earths. That's going to be not a cakewalk for Huber Squashers, but he's got to feel fairly confident going into that matchup, giving Everybody Earths his 8th loss and knocking him out. So, I've rambled enough, and I'm sure I'll hear about some of this stuff in the podcast here in Unfinished Business or whatever. So, all right, whoever is still along for the ride, I'm glad you stuck with it, and hopefully I didn't annoy you too much. Or I said, let me know how many times you rolled your eyes or sighed or was like, come on, during this review here. So just like, get it over with. But anyway, so this will be the end. Here coming up, week 11. We got the trade deadline coming up here, I think, on Saturday. So if you're trying to make any trades, now's the time to do it. And I don't know what's going on with Possum Magic here. I think this is like the 3rd or 4th year in a row, and I don't know how it happened, how or why, but every year we talk about how it's the end of the regular season, going into the playoffs here, and Possum Magic has really put himself in a bind by having, the trade deadline is almost over. We're going to be past it here. And he's up to 15 moves. He's only got 1 move left. And assuming he makes the playoffs, technically he's got 6 weeks and only 1 move. So again, he's got to be hoping and praying that nothing happens to any of his starting lineup here these next 6 weeks. And although Mighty Midgets, he's also at 15, so he's pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot. So he's got to get through at least the next 4 or 5 weeks, hoping with only one transaction left. So those guys are going to be on the edge of their seats, hoping nothing happens to their teams here. So it's going to be interesting to see. But again, I swear it's like every year we get to like week 11 or 12, and it's like, Possum, you're out of moves. The trade deadline's passed. What do you gotta just be praying, hoping and praying that nothing happens to your team here. I think it's every year here. So, all right, now that is officially the end of my ranting and raving. So week 11, we only have this year's going by so fast. We only have 3 weeks left in the regular season. This week it will determine the knockout pool winner. Again, it's Isotopes versus Possum Magic here. And, we've got some great matchups that are going to have playoff implications in terms of maybe knocking some people out, getting a couple people in, and, we'll see what happens. So, good luck to everybody, and we'll see you back here again next week. All right, guys, see you here. Thanks, and see you next week.